All right, call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Chris.
Here.
Dave.
Here.
Richard.
Here.
Otis.
Here.
Yancy. Tor. I'm going to put him down. Harley.
Yes, here.
Okay.
Do we have any modifications to the agenda? If none, we have a motion to accept the agenda. So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Do we have any amendments to the minutes from the last meeting? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Public comments. Do we have any public comments not associated with the public hearing? Hearing none, we'll move on. Nothing on the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second it.
We have a public hearing for an application from Dave Ulmer for a variance for the 20-yard front setback requirement to allow the construction of a duplex approximately 10 feet from the property line at 701 Joa Street. I'm sure there will be questions.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Dave Ulmer.
Yes.
And I think I wrote everything in the application that I was asking for, simply that I own two 50 by 100 lots there and have built a duplex on one of them and am planning on building a second duplex on the other. That the zoning requirements are that you have a 20-foot setback on each of the roads on each side, which pushes the building back and makes it narrower and actually forces the building 10 feet closer to my only real neighbor there. And so looking at how it was, and if you've had a chance to drive by, there's a nice wide 20-foot road that now goes back through there, which would provide fire access to the house in the back as well as the Randrup property on the side. Aesthetically, it looks better. It doesn't affect visibility as you drive to the corner or anything. It provides fire safety, I think, to both properties much, much better. And so I'm hoping you'll grant the variance that would allow that.
What is the square footage of the duplex?
It's about 1,580 square feet. 1,500, yeah, right around that.
Okay.
The one concern I had, well, there's two concerns that I had. One was I talked to Eric Castro, he's a neighbor real close to you. He really would like you to leave the trees along that roadway.
I had an email exchange this morning with Eric, and that's exactly what he says, is that he likes the trees across the front, and I told him exactly, I do too. I mean, I think it looks very nice to have the trees there. It gives sound, vision, separation, and in fact, one of the reasons as I looked at building the foundations, putting piling in, is it shouldn't interfere with the root systems. The only thing I said was that if in the future they become a windfall threat or something else happens, I'm going to have to deal with them, but certainly wouldn't if it wasn't a hazard to the property.
And the other concern, which I think Chris probably just calculated, is that's a large house for such a small property. I want to make sure you don't actually also need a
What's our coverage on that?
for lot coverage. Because the
It
max
fits the
coverage is
35%.
35%? Yeah, you're at 31.8.
okay. So you're good.
You're good, but you're close.
Yeah, on a 50 by 100 lot, everything's close. Yes.
Okay. That was really the only questions I had concerning it.
Yeah.
Anybody else have
else for
any
me?
additional questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. And since it doesn't appear there's any other testimony, do we want to go ahead and vote on this item? Do we have a motion and a second?
I so move.
A second?
Roll call? Or do you want to just... You can do a roll call, okay.
Now, yes is that we approve it, and no
Yeah.
is we don't.
Chris,
Yes.
Otis,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Carly,
Yes.
George.
Yep.
Okay.
Dave?
Yeah, I vote yes too.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to non-agenda items.
Read out loud. It'd be nice to see something going on there.
Thank you.
Are there any commissioner comments? Staff comments? I guess we're on to the review of the zoning code. Liz?
So we're at Article 3, Community Design Standards, which provides standards for new developments mostly. The different sections, Chapter 3.2, which is Building Orientation and Design, even though on the table of contents it talks about residential buildings, non-residential buildings, most of that has been deleted out. So that we're actually not going to have design standards on every single building. We're just going to have design standards on the Main Street area and then in the historic district. So all of the other ones are deleted, except I think the drive-through is still there too. Similarly, just deleting out things like all the references to landscaping and required landscaping are deleted out. All of the references to outdoor lighting standards are deleted out. Requirements for, I guess I'm going through first all the things that we took out. All the requirements for bicycle parking, that's just an encouragement and just standards. If you are going to do it, this is kind of the standard for the type of use. And then it goes through the types of public and private improvements that we do. I think for the Main Street district, it's kind of long, but basically the goal is to keep intact the main physical assets of the downtown area, namely having our buildings built right to the right-of-way, so there's not parking between the street and the front door, so you can actually walk down the sidewalks and look into buildings, orienting those doors to the main street, having storefront windows, having an awning, maintaining commercial uses downstairs in the ground floor level, and residential uses upstairs. So it's not nothing that's not there now. So really it's just trying to encourage or protect the things and the attributes that are currently there. I think the one change that is maybe a little bit of stretch is the on page 25, which is articulation, to try and make sure that we don't just have giant blank walls on our main street or on any of the facing streets, that there's some kind of architectural interest, a window, a break of some kind, just something, so it's not just like a 25, 30-foot wall of nothingness, So I think that would be one of the things that is maybe a little bit different. On page 27, this is for large format developments. something I don't anticipate ever having to use, but I like the idea of having something in place so we have some controls if for some reason a large Walmart-like development decided to come to town. We'll have something on the books that we actually could address that with, because right now we don't have anything to really be able to make any impact on that kind of development. So while I don't think we'll ever use it, I would encourage having it in there, and I basically just kept the standard language and kept the standard format that was on the template. So on page 29 is the historic district standards. The language that's in red is what's new. The other language was already in code for the Harriman Slough area. And the difference here is just clarifying materials for siding and also maintaining that build-to line right to the sidewalk and then expanding that historic district into Singley Alley. But as I mentioned last time, it's pretty light touch as far as historic districts go. So I don't think it's really too overbearing, and it's based very much on what we already had on the books.
As far as the historic district standards, Liz, is there anything about like upkeep in order to be granted or to be maintained?
We have never adopted a property maintenance code. That's generally where you would point to on those kinds of issues, but we don't have that part of the building code adopted here in Petersburg.
Okay. So there's no teeth?
So there's no teeth to that, no.
Okay.
Liz, is that something that we could put in the code, or would that have to be something that would be in a separate ordinance?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
He wants to know if we can do it.
Give me code what he wants to know.
Like a maintenance requirement of
Yeah, like power wash your building and make sure your roof's okay, and you know you're not an embarrassment to the historical district of Petersburg.
Not have more than 4 junk cars in your yard.
Well, we have things in the nuisance ordinance that address some of those things, and also the dangerous building code that address some of those things. But when it comes to just general disrepair, we probably, if it didn't get to the threshold of being dangerous, then we look at things that are considered untidy, and then we would need at least 3 complaints from residents in the neighborhood, in the area, to actually address that.
I see.
So, but we don't, like I said, we don't have that property maintenance code, which actually details, kind of a detailed grass heights
I
and
can't
things like
imagine
that.
Joe wants to enforce that.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we want to go down that road.
Heights, siding falling off, any disrepair to the front of a building. Where do you stop?
Would there be any perks to the people who are granted in historic?
Depends if the borough wants to pursue that, because if the borough wanted to, and has set up, that historical preservation committee, if they wanted to go through the process of having a historic preservation plan and declaring a historic district, it could qualify for state grants for a historic district. But just Petersburg saying that it's a historic district doesn't really get them any perks, except that you're in the historic district as far as Petersburg's concerned,
Okay.
Let's see if I was going to move on. Moving into page 34 and 35. and this has to do more with subdivisions and new developments, just ensuring that there's access to a subdivision and then access within a subdivision, and differentiating between subdivisions that are service area 1 and on roads and remote subdivisions, and having different standards for those so that we're not doing the one size fits all. Thank you, Karen. Then moving on to 36 and 37, there's a long list of automobile access and circulation, and making sure that when we cross culverts and ditches that we're going to replace those, that we don't have our driveways too close to each other, that we don't have driveways going onto main streets, that we're not too close to the intersection with the driveway, not too close to another driveway, enough room for parking and loading and unloading and all of those kinds of things that you would want to check off the list as you went through a development. So that's all in there. Pedestrian access is limited to just large format developments. Again, this is kind of that Walmart or shopping center development idea, to make sure that there's adequate walkways connecting the stores and connecting the stores to the street, so that we don't just have giant parking lot between the street and a big store without like a means of pedestrian access to those locations. Page 43, screening fences and walls. Mostly in the cases where you would want, as the commission, to require screening, that just has standards for that. And then residential and non-residential fences and walls. And I've left most of this open on page 45. Right now we have a standard 6 foot for everything, and I haven't really decided whether to amend that. In some cases I could see where industrial uses might want to be above that 6 foot, and so I'm sort of looking at maybe increasing that for non-residential uses, especially on interior property lines. Mm-hmm. So I might adjust that a little bit.
I saw on height and residential number 2, it talks about chain link fence, but like a lot of folks like to build wood fences, and I don't see anything dealing with height and like something that's not chain link. Maybe I was just a little bit lost, but.
So it's, if you wanted to do 6 feet, if you wanted to do chain link fence, you could do 6 feet all around because it's open. But then if you're not doing,
Okay, so then it's.
then the other,
like,
the lower ones would apply.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do know there's a fence or two around town where if you're driving a small car, you can't see around the corner.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about too, where you get that standard where it's within the front or the side yard against a street. You have a lower fence requirement so that you could see over the corner, so you're not blocking that vision access. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the idea behind that. And they have it set at 4 feet. We actually have something on the books now that limits it to 36 inches, I think. So
Is that even really a fence?
exactly. So then I'm thinking, well, really 4 feet is.
Gets too low, it becomes
Yeah.
a trip hazard.
Exactly. So really 4 feet is probably a more reasonable number in there. So I'm leaving it as is at the moment, and I'll see how that kind of plays out. But it does provide for those changes where it could affect vision on the street. So skipping through the rest of it. So just page 50 and 51 talks about parking and loading and parking requirements. Again, you'll notice that parking requirements, off-street parking requirements for Main Street and the Historic District are 0. And the reason behind that is partly to encourage new development, so people aren't restricted by that parking requirement. So if you wanted to expand your business or build something new, you're not going to have to set aside off-street parking. Unless it's a residential use. If it's a residential use, you're still going to have to provide some sort of off-street parking.
Yeah, there's been several businesses that had to quit because they didn't have parking.
Exactly, yeah. So
we don't want that.
It's happened in the past.
And then it goes through 52 and 53, looking at all the different parking requirements by use if you're not in those exempt zones. And then on page 53, in red are what's currently in code versus what is being proposed. I think one of the things that we'll have to look at a little bit more carefully is in industrial. The standard that came with this template is 1,000, per 1,000 feet of square feet of floor area. But since we have a lot of, seasonal workers that aren't necessarily driving to work, is that a realistic standard to hold people to? And so that might get switched over to, one space for every 2 year-round employees or something like that, something that's a little bit different and takes into account the transient nature of most of those employees.
And I kind of like our existing code for like the bed and breakfast parking better than what's in there, because a lot of our folks that are staying in that sort of housing, not a whole lot of them have vehicles because of the nature of travel through here and stuff, or either on those cruise ships and so I think our current one is more relaxed than the 2 per use.
Well, we never would have a bed and breakfast with 5 rooms because we're not going to allow that. So I'm not sure how we would.
Well,
it doesn't really.
I hate requiring a bunch of spaces that aren't ever going to get used.
I think I'll have to look back and see what is there. I think it was whatever's needed for the residents plus another one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I'll go back and double check that.
So for the single-family dwelling, this is just one space per dwelling, like off-street?
Right, off-street.
Okay. And that's standard?
I think, what is it right now? Is it 2? It's 2 right now.
Okay. Because that seems like most households have 2 cars.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you can do more than this. This is just the minimum.
Yeah, and not having an insufficient number of spaces becomes quite an issue with snow plowing and stuff in the winter, because then you've got nowhere to move your car.
As I said, we can put 2, but this is, people are welcome to do 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to. You can certainly always do more.
Or maybe just tag it on if it's a rental unit or something like that to protect the renter from not having enough parking. I don't know.
Well, if you have an accessory dwelling, which is, you have 2 dwellings, and you're going to be having 2 spaces. Mm-hmm. Or if you have a duplex, you're going to have 2 spaces.
Yeah, I'm thinking along the lines of if you're renting a house by yourself and then it only having 1 spot and you have 2 cars while you're parking one on the street. But
well, it's going to be your problem. Good luck getting a renter if you're not providing any off-street parking.
That's true. You're probably making a bigger deal out of that than needs to be.
Again, we could put the 2 in there, but I think most folks can figure out if they're building a house how much parking they want. But let's see. So parking requirements continue on. And then page 55 has the exceptions to the off-street parking requirements, and you'll see that those Main Street and historic are exempt except for residential. And then there's opportunity for the Planning Commission to reduce the off-street parking requirements if they so choose. And opportunity for doing things like shared parking spaces if their uses don't coincide at the same times and different things. In a lot of places on page 56, they're actually going to maximum number of off-street parking where you're not allowed to offer more than a certain amount of off-street parking. And that's becoming something that's kind of popular down south. And so they don't want you to use too much of the downtown commercial area for off-street parking, and so they're limiting how much you can offer. But I kind of X'd out that
I appreciate
part of it, so I didn't want to get too micromanaging of everything. So, and then we go down into the minimum standards for if you are offering off-street parking, then you have minimum dimensions based on the kind of angle and the stall depths and all of that. And then also, page 57 has the ADA requirements, so how many spaces you need to provide ADA, and also has a provision for if you want to do an electric charging station, that it's just considered an accessory use, and you're free to do that. 59 has the standards for bicycle parking based on uses, and these aren't required, but if you are going to do them, just gives you a guideline on how to do it and how to do it to current standards.
I like the change of verbiage.
Huh?
I like the change of verbiage.
You want to change?
No, I like it.
Oh, you like the change of verbiage? Okay. Then on to page 61, which is public and private improvements. So if someone's doing a subdivision or developing a property, these are the standards that we would hold them to as they developed. And it goes through and describes street standards and the size of the streets, the sidewalks, the bikes, if you wanted to provide a bike lane, making sure that streets in developed subdivisions connect, making sure that we have blocks that connect and go through. It also has a section on allowing for privately maintained roads in a right-of-way under certain conditions. So if you're outside of Service Area 1 and you want to put a road into a subdivision, but you don't want to build it to borough standards and have it maintained by the borough, it provides a way of doing that. So you could build the road, agree that you're going to, as the owner, maintain that road, and you'll put a covenant in on the deed, and everybody else, anybody that buys that into that subdivision agrees that they're going to privately maintain that road. And then you wouldn't be required to build it to those borough standards. It also allows that to happen in Service Area 1 on 4 or fewer lots. So if we do a minor subdivision, you could have a privately maintained road as well. And it really just keeps the cost of development down for smaller developments where you don't really have enough lots to spread the cost throughout those lots and make it worthwhile, but you could still develop a smaller piece of property. Public use areas, so if someone wanted to dedicate land for a park or something, that allows the borough to accept that, but that's on page 74, but doesn't require the borough to necessarily do with anything with it or maintain it. But if there's, 1,000 house development or something and it makes sense to have a park there, then, just have a provision for that. Page 75 has the sewer and water improvements, and the improvements are scaled so that the larger the development or the subdivision, the further you have to go to, required to connect. So again, the idea is if you have more lots, you can spread cost over those lots. Currently, it's a flat 150 feet from the property line, so it doesn't matter if you're creating 4 lots or if you're creating 100 lots, you only have to connect if you're 150 feet from if the main sewer line is 150 feet from the property line. So this kind of adds a little bit more and encourages people to develop more and actually extend those sewer lines out further. Let's see. It also has a provision for private wastewater systems. which is more for people who are outside of the current service area. So if you're going to do a subdivision and you want to have smaller lot sizes, like under an acre, then it allows you to develop a cluster or neighborhood wastewater system. If you're going to do individual septic systems, so each person is responsible for developing their own, then you're going to have a minimum acre lot size, and then every person can have their own system. So an acre, I think, is kind of the recommended minimum from DNR, and so we just want to make sure that people have enough room to be able to provide for that septic system on site on the lot size. But, if you're doing a big development and you want to offer smaller lot sizes but offer this other option, then that's available to you too. Page 77 goes on to storm drainage and surface water, and that's basically just making sure that we have adequate drainage. So if you're building something, you have to put in culverts or get permission to put in culverts or larger culverts. It allows for Public Works to kind of require that, the culverts be addressed and make sure there's adequate drainage. It also requires a 10-foot easement on any existing streams, and then a 25-foot easement on anadromous streams. And those can be made wider by the commission if there's cause to do so. See. And then page 78 goes into utilities, extending utilities, and basically you just have to build out to the utility, which is primarily electric, to their standards. 79, just make sure that you put in easements so the utilities can access. 80, make sure that you have approval to construct. 82, basically it's a way of allowing the developer to start selling lots even if they haven't finished all the public improvements that are required. They can put in a performance bond to promise to finish those improvements within, I think it's a year or two. That's currently in code, and I just basically followed what's currently in code. I don't know that anyone's ever done it, but we have that option available. Mm-hmm. And then chapter 3.7, which is page 84 and 85, goes into signs. I think this is almost identical to what we have in code, except I did put in that flashing and animated signs are prohibited in all districts, residential or commercial. Currently, they're only prohibited in commercial and industrial, right? Flashing, yeah. And so you could have a flashing sign in your home occupation. So in single-family residential, and so we decided that we should probably not have flashing signs in residential.
Well, you get one now and get grandfathered in.
Yeah, but we got to hold off. Don't let anyone do it. And that's it. Ta-da!
I just have one qualifier. So the cluster septic systems, that would work where everyone, when they buy the property, they agree that they're all going to help, manage one?
The developer would have to put that in advance. And yeah, there's going to be I would assume that DEC would require some sort of wastewater technician standard to be able to manage that. But they do have that on the books. I'm not sure how often it's actually used. I think 99.9% of the time people go with the individual septic system. Yeah.
I think people have enough trouble just agreeing to grade a road together and pay for that. I can't imagine. I don't know.
It's your turn to do the dirty work?
Yeah.
Usually, those are put together, the ones I've seen in the past, where it's like a group of duplexes, and they'll have one shared system, but it's all written in the covenants with the duplexes. So you pay in a certain amount, and that goes into the fund to maintain the system, and it's all hired. My mom lived in a place like that for a while, and it worked quite well, but, it's just, I don't know how often it'd be used up here, but,
I don't think it is, but
Yeah. Good deal.
yeah.
It's the same thing that really, it's the way really roads should be done too, where they set up a covenant and everyone's going to pay into this road fund and use that to maintain a private road. You know,
Yeah.
it's,
It's like, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, it takes it to the next level a little bit with the,
Yeah.
yeah.
So is it required then that they do a covenant and that it is agreed upon ahead of time then?
Well, they would have to have that system built prior to being able to sell the lots. And I actually didn't put anything about a required covenant, so no, it wouldn't
Okay.
be.
I don't know. I'd
We could.
be in favor of adding
Putting something in there?
Yeah.
Okay. That there's some sort of maintenance agreement?
Yeah.
Yeah, that probably would make it a little bit simpler,
Okay.
but,
Motion to adjourn?
do we have any more comments on the code?